Have you ever dreamed of being an inventor, coming up with something so cool that it changes the course of human history, leading to riches and all the cool things that come with it? Sometimes the inventors create something so powerful that some people see them as a threat and they want to keep them quiet. And by quiet, I mean dead. It's 1997 and a man named Mike Marcum is on the brink of unleashing his most astonishing discovery yet. Marcum in Stanbury, Missouri, powers up a machine so powerful the electricity in the air crackles around it. He's dying in anticipation to see how powerful this thing really is. What exactly did he invent? This man's story is filled with bizarre phenomenon, uncanny discoveries, and completely unexplainable events. And better yet, he's not the only one. Our friend Mike has summoned enough power from the electricity grid to completely shut it down. What exactly is he up to? He's about to test if time travel is actually possible. And only in a matter of a split second, Mike Marcum would disappear, never to be heard from again. So what exactly happened to Mike? And was his crazy invention ever successful? That's the kind of story we're going to get into, so stick around. Now, I'd be remiss before we get into kind of all these cool inventor deaths if I didn't explain something that's very important behind the scenes when it comes to inventing things and patenting it, whether it's in North America or abroad. Basically, like a lot of things, you want to make sure that you own the rights to making this like invention that you create, whether it's, I don't know, maybe a new kind of blender or a time machine. So in the United States of America, there's something called the Invention Secrecy Act, and this is basically a safeguard that the US and some other countries have similar legislation put into place so it stops people from, let's say, inventing some really cool weapons to overthrow the government, or maybe selling it to a foreign adversary like Russia, or I don't know, what would be another foreign adversary in the United States? Abortion clinics. Okay. Basically, what this Invention Secrecy Act does is it allows the government to impose security and secret orders against patents that inventors try to basically get rights to. So you maybe invent a time machine, you apply for a patent, the Department of Defense finds this out, and they come in and say, we need that. As we're going to get into, that's not that uncommon. And the idea that your own government can take control of essentially your intellectual property is terrifying, especially in this day and age when everyone's already fearful of the censorship of our governments and their allies. So in other countries, such as the United Kingdom, similar legislation exists, such as the Official Secrets Act. And these things could all be invoked in the name of national security, basically giving them the ability to have complete control over any tech that you invent that could be either harmful to national security or kind of give your, like I said, their allies or enemies a leg up. And yeah, the idea of maybe inventing that really cool thing that you had in the back of your head, you got to make sure that it's not going to be valuable to the biggest gang on earth, your government. Now, we're going to get into a few stories of some gentlemen that thought a little too much and they came up with some really cool inventions and they paid the ultimate price for it. So back to the story about Mike Marcum sitting on his porch, about to time travel back to a time, probably the Stone Age, to see some cave girl titties. And I bet you it was a smelly time. I'm just going to leave it at that. It was probably a smelly time. It's not even about the boobs or anything like that. I imagine sex wasn't as enjoyable. It just wasn't. I'm going to go out on a limb here and just say, I bet you that the 69 position wasn't invented till well after we had showers. Okay, back to time travel. So Mike Marcum is born in 1973 and he's no ordinary inventor. He's raised in the small town of Stanbury, Missouri, and this guy's got an imagination bigger than Reddit. Anyhow, his fascination with the concept of time travel begins early on in his life, and it kind of became an obsession. And so for like his science-oriented brain, he starts researching this stuff and kind of understanding more and more about the theories of relativity and the science behind time travel, which, I mean, it does exist. It is possible. Different experiments have shown, I think in Antarctica, they did some experiments on, I don't want to say neutrinos, but basically showing how like certain particles are traveling back in time, how they're able now to send quantum data back in time. And also, like, they've demonstrated that there's this phenomenon where quantum entanglement exists. And essentially, the distance and time between particles across the universe, if they're entangled, time and distance are of no matter to them. So, like, essentially, they can communicate instantly, which from our perspective is like time travel. And so the idea is that if you can send these particles a little bit here and there, you can maybe send a whole person made up of a bunch of particles backwards or forwards in time. I just want to interject with a little bit of advice from one of the coolest physicists out there, Leonard Susskind. His advice is, we've always known how to time travel and it's easy. All you got to do is close your eyes and take a nap. However, like a lot of time travel things, it creates these paradoxes like, okay, I'm going to time travel back in time and meet my grandfather. But then you change that course of events and your grandfather doesn't fuck your grandma and you don't get born. And that kind of sucks for you, but you would never know. But then you would never be able to invent the time machine and go back in time and affect that. So you see the paradox. It's a little bit hard to believe. But what some people talk about, or some people, like scientists, I want to think of Sean Carroll, Hugh Everett, they have this thing called like the many worlds theory. So rather than traveling back and forth in time with these machines and this technology you could invent, rather you're traveling to other dimensions, parallel dimensions, other timelines. All right. We always talk about the kind of classic paradoxes. So you go back, you meet your grandfather and all those things. Let's talk about how if time travel is possible, there's an easy way to do it. Okay, this will appeal to Gen Z out there because it's a shortcut to getting a time machine. And if it doesn't work, you can just give it up. Actually, if you ask me, it's probably one of the easiest things in the universe. This is what you do. Sit down, make a pact with yourself that if you ever invent a time machine in the future, you will travel back to that exact moment and give yourself the instructions on how to build a time machine. Now just sit down and wait for a knock at the door. If no one shows up with blueprints in hands, then congratulations. You can go back to being a victim. Because let's be real, if it was meant to happen, your future self would already be here telling you how to do it. And that would be kind of like mansplaining. So there's no point in doing the work. And time travel's super misogynist, am I right? Or what? So I could go on this subject for hours because I find it so friggin' interesting. But the point is, this guy really thought he was going to build a time machine. After majoring in studying electricity, Mike begins to start venturing down these homemade experiments, and he comes up with a design based off of something called a Jacob's ladder. So this Jacob's ladder is essentially a classic piece of electrical equipment used to demonstrate different theories of electricity. You see it often in old science fiction movies where the mad scientists getting electrocuted in the crazy hair. So basically it consists of two metal rods that slightly diverge at the top, and a bunch of electrical currents are pumped through them suckers, and you'll start seeing arcing electricity going everywhere. So Marcum had one of these at home, and he'd been experimenting with different voltages and frequencies, trying to understand, based off of, which we'll get into, based off a little bit of like Tesla's work, how electricity and gravity interact and how it could be also related to the fabric of space-time. So Mike's just electrocuting stuff basically in his basement. So one day Mike decided he wanted to up the ante these kind of electrical experiments he's doing in the basement, thinking that if he could get things just to the right frequency, he might catch a glimpse, of some kind of dimensional shift or God knows what. But he gets the bright idea to pump this thing full of electricity one day, and I'm going to try and throw this like little screw electrical bolt through the electrical current, which is dangerous in itself because it could cause like a bunch of arcing, and it might look more scary than actual dangerous. I don't know. But he throws this thing, this sheet metal screw, through this vortex of electricity. I want to mention, one of the key components he took to this thing is he added some spinning element to the electrical currents and of his like invention to give it like a little bit more time travel juice. But he throws this screw through the electrical current and it completely disappears. He stands there mesmerized going, what the fuck, man? Seriously, I'd be shitting myself. Only a few moments later, he's standing around and he hears the drop of a screw. and it falls onto his floor in a different place than where he tossed it, and long enough away from when he threw it that he knew, hey, this thing disappeared and reappeared completely. He was perplexed, and he's thinking to himself, man, did I just send this thing through space-time? So Mike gets the idea to expand upon his experiment, because if he wants to really hone in, he thinks he's onto something now. But the problem that he has like a very small scale version of what he thinks that he needs to build. So he needs to really ramp up his project, and to do this, Mike decides to tap into his local electrical grid and start stealing himself some electricity from the town. Lo and behold, he goes to conduct his next experiment and blows out a complete like power substation, completely makes the neighborhood go without power. And unfortunately, this leads to some serious legal repercussions for Mike, and he's actually put in jail in 1995 for the theft of electricity. So at this point, Marcum he's done with it. The courts have said you can't keep doing these electrical experiments in your basement. And he's sad because, let's be honest, if he invented time travel, he would have fixed this problem. Now, Marcum decides that he wants to still continue his experiments legally, but to do that, he needs a ton of electricity, equipment, and infrastructure. So what's he do? He turns to the public for support. He goes on to a TV show called Coast to Coast AM, which is fairly famous with people that love paranormal UFO stuff. And it's hosted by a fella by the name of Art Bell. I think cover in one of my episodes someday, but he's the real deal, original kind of late night radio DJ talking about alien abductions and time travel, and all kinds of people would call in and tell stories to his show. It was neat. Listeners of this show are drawn to Marcum's story, and Art Bell quickly starts going through Marcum's claims, asking some really super technical questions, and so do people calling to the show, and they feel like, man, like this guy's the real deal. Like seriously, like he knows his stuff. His science is completely correct. If you were to invent some kind of time machine, according to the people involved in that show at the time, they're like, yeah, like this guy's on the right path. So lo and behold, people start donating money and equipment. So over the next period of time, Marcum becomes like a regular guest on Coast to Coast AM. And people can call in, ask him all kinds of questions for updates on the experiments. And the host, Art Bell himself, expresses quite a bit of skepticism, but also fascination with this young inventor. But like I said, over this period of time, he wins Art Bell over. Like this guy Mike really knew his stuff. And by 1997, Marcum's confidence is back, and he's ready to kind of time travel again. So he comes on the show and he claims, okay, I'm mere weeks away from achieving the goal of time travel. I'm ready to start sending some biological things through there. One of the things Mike does say is that he actually tested it with a hamster. So he sends a hamster through this little like electrical current. And according to Mike, this hamster reappears completely unharmed. And in the same fashion as the skirt, it seems to have gone through some shift in time, reappearing at a later time and in a slightly different location, which Mike or people kind of account to. If you're going to time travel, the earth is spinning. So unless you come back at the exact same speed a moment in time, you're going to be in a different place. So what's left to do for Mike but to try this thing out himself? And with a sense of urgency and anticipation, he's got the backers of all these people. There's Mike in Missouri, standing around this machine. The electricity is going crazy. Probably got hair that's going all crazy. Like he's got the static electricity in the air, and he's getting ready to jump through and time travel himself. Back on Coast to Coast AM, listeners wait in anticipation to hear the results of Mike's awesome time travel experience. But days turn to weeks, and weeks turn to months, and nobody can figure out what happened to Mike. And we're going to get into that in a little bit more, but I want to shed a little bit of light on a few other inventors that aren't with us anymore that kind of may have suffered similar fates. Okay, first up I want to cover Tesla a little bit, because this is where Mike, if you'd look at his work with electricity, builds off of what Tesla did. Tesla is known to be one of the most brilliant inventors that ever lived. But one of the things that's really interesting is what happened with some of his kind of more fringe work after he died. So Tesla was born in 1856 in Croatia, and his life was marked by an insatiable sense of curiosity. He moves to the States in 1884. He's actually working for Edison and basically coming up with this whole new type of distributing electricity using a alternating current, which according to Tesla is better and more efficient, but it never really takes off. He's a victim of some of the first recorded cases of like corporate propaganda. Basically, Edison is trying to destroy this guy by saying his electricity sucks. He did this like experiments using Tesla's electricity versus his direct current. He actually was like killing animals with Tesla's electricity. It was wild. Tesla comes up with what ends up being some of the most valuable inventions like ever regarding like AC. He also has this thing called like the Wardenclyffe Tower, which is electrical distribution network, like basically able to send electricity through Wi-Fi to the entire world, free power for everyone. Okay, just a thought, seriously, if you invented free Wi-Fi, I give it like 6 months before Verizon makes you disappear, faster than affordable home internet. But the things that like Tesla talks about is how maybe that gravity's like the fundamental fabric of a reality and time, like electricity might be part of that, or like using electricity, you could shift dimensions and travel through time. He thought he was also communicating with some of his electrical inventions with people on Mars. So he was definitely out there, definitely on the fringe. And unfortunately, this guy, despite all his crazy inventions, all his success with this technology, he dies alone on January 7th, 1943, at an apartment near Central Park in New York. He's 86, and at the time of his death, his only friend was a pigeon. How fucking sad is that? People believe it was just basically a heart attack. There was no indication at the time that this guy is murdered, but he's got all these patents and all this technology regarding like aliens, time travel, like free energy, like things that if, I don't know, you wanted to build a bomb, you wanted to time travel, you could use. During his final years, Tesla's right, he's in complete seclusion. He doesn't talk to people. He's sort of an odd man already. It said that he placed basically a do not disturb sign on his apartment door and don't talk to me. But right after his death, within days, the US government is all over this guy's apartment. They're taking his patents, his documents, his notes. They're taking everything. A bunch of his papers are actually said to be confiscated by something called the Office of Alien Property. I just want to clarify that it's not cool aliens like the little green man. It's like foreign adversary. Again, similar to the Invention Secrecy Act. Basically, the government knows that the stuff that he was working on, his ideas, were so powerful that they could be dangerous in the wrong hands. Particularly, people think that they were after his work on the free wireless energy transmission, the free use of energy, things that would allow to basically harness massive amounts of energy from nature and use it however they wanted to use it. They didn't want it in the enemy hands. But one of the crazy things is that to this day, we still don't know what was in those papers or some of those like patents. Basically, the FBI and the Office of Alien Property said nope, and it's been kept secret to this day. So sounds like Tesla may have been onto something, and if he was, we're not going to find out about it. I get it. You want to take it. You don't want China getting this information, but just remember that it's not for your own good. It's for theirs. And their idea of good is, let's just say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Okay. Just so you think I'm not crazy, that there is a real danger to being or having proprietary knowledge of something that either a foreign adversary or your government doesn't want you to know. I'm going to cover a few more stories. Cool. Shane Todd was born in 1984. No coincidence, right? 1984, George Orwell book about Big Brother and your government spying on you. Anyhow, from an early age, Shane is super interested in engineering and tech, eventually going on to get a engineering degree from the University of Florida. Shane's expertise laid in something called gallium nitride technology, which is a material that's prized for its use in electronics. Basically, when I think of this stuff, I know I can't understand it, so we're going to say this guy's making computer chip stuff, making real fast computers, making the kind of stuff that you're not playing Oregon Trail on. So in 2011, Shane moves to Singapore, and he's continuing work basically for a prestigious research institution, and he's working on these high performance GANs, gallium nitride. So this project that Shane's working on is for a group called A-Star, and it's backed by the Singapore government. And basically some stuff he's working on could have military applications. It involves these GAN technology devices being used in computers, LEDs, all kinds of like cutting edge technology. But on June 24th, 2012, only a year after being in Singapore, Shane's found dead in his hotel room. His body is discovered by his girlfriend. Quickly, Singaporean authorities come to the scene and they declare this a suicide. However, Shane's family strongly disagrees. Upon reviewing emails and documents, the family found that he'd expressed fears for his safety and concerns about the research that he was doing. He brought up ethical implications regarding his work and became opposed to how some of the tech might be used. And additionally, they also discovered that he had booked a flight back to the United States of America. His family also cites that Shane had plans to resign from basically this project and get the hell out of there. So it doesn't make sense that he just up and killed himself all of a sudden. The condition of Shane's apartment gave his family even more pause, because there were signs that a struggle occurred and that some of his belongings were basically appeared to be hastily packed and that some of his stuff was missing. All his sensitive work information, his laptops, hard drives, something like that were completely gone. And there was essentially like no trace of anything to do with his work. Shane's family to this day is vocal about his death, saying that it's not a suicide and is 100% related to the work that he was doing, that it was a threat to countries like China, and it was in their interest not to have him doing any more work, or just in general, like I said, he was behind inventing things that he had proprietary knowledge of, which essentially put his life in danger. Oh yeah, one other thing that points to the fact that this probably wasn't a suicide is that Shane's work also involved collaboration with Huawei, a Chinese company known to have very close ties to the Chinese government. All his laptops, all his notebooks, and all of his proprietary knowledge and work is erased. Probably not erased, it's in somebody's hand somewhere. Maybe he was paid to disappear by the government or a foreign adversary that just doesn't want the tech. That's something you hear about quite a bit, is like, you invent something that could disrupt maybe, I don't know, it's a new type of jet fuel, so airplanes can use it without polluting the environment, and it's so great. And you're going to disrupt that industry. Let me be in the benefit of like those fuel companies to just pay you to disappear, pay your inventions to get put on the shelf. Nobody's ever going to use them because it's not profitable. And they're going to sit there, those patents, those notes, those technology, until it makes financial sense to release them. I hope that's not true. So often these things, like in Tesla's case, it's taken under the guise of national security, and even the investigation into these people's disappearance, when there's national security getting claimed, like, we're never going to find out the details. And maybe not, maybe there's nothing in there, but man, it's a whole lot of, it's too much. A scuffle gone wrong. All right, this one you may have heard of, and it's a guy named Stanley Meyer. So he's an inventor from Ohio. There's been a few documentaries on this guy, but essentially he develops a technology that he claims will replace all fossil fuels, running cars on nothing but water by converting the water to hydrogen and creating another source of, I don't know if it's clean, but yeah, like free energy. So this water fuel cell that Myers invents obviously is controversial to maybe companies that produce fossil fuels, and a lot of attention is directed towards this guy, also from the government. So Meyer does obtain several patents, which drew interest from a lot of investment firms as well. He was featured on a British TV program called Equinox, and it seemed to be that like this guy's tech was somewhat legitimate and had the potential to basically convert our reliance on fossil fuels and make it a reliance on water. I'm just going to point out though, it's like my environmental background. Using water isn't a free source of energy. A lot of people think, oh, they're going to run stuff on free water. Yes, it's less fossil fuels, but anything we take from the natural environment is going to have an impact. So it's never free. You still have to do a cost benefit kind of analysis, or you could just call it like it's a trade-off. So we take water, say from the oceans and our lakes to power our vehicles. We might see reduced water levels. Maybe we see increased humidity in the atmosphere, temperature changes, all those things. So it's never free. Stanley Meyer, despite his success, is going on TV, people are starting to learn who he is, investing in him. On March 20, 1998, he dies. He was having dinner at a Cracker Barrel, and basically it's a good place for anyone that doesn't have a lot of money or you're somewhat white trash to eat. Yeah, so he's at this restaurant with his brother and two Belgian investors, and he suddenly, in the middle of dinner, runs outside. He clutches his throat and he collapses onto the street. His brother says that Meyer's last words were, "They poisoned me." Despite these dramatic claims, the coroner's report contributes his death to a cerebral aneurysm, citing natural causes. However, the sudden and unexpected death, combined with his controversial invention, fueled conspiracy theories about basically this guy being taken out by competitors or governments. Many of Meyer's supporters believe that he was assassinated and that his technology would ultimately be suppressed, because a lot of critics argue that it was no coincidence that he died. But there's something that does come to light, and it's that Myers was actually sued by two of his investors who claimed that his technology was fraudulent. And Myers fought against that case, but the court ultimately sided with the investors, saying that, yeah, like his inventions aren't proven, and causing him to go lose a lot of financial support before he ultimately dies. And what happens is that all of his patents expire, and then companies that kind of look at them don't see it as commercially viable. So it goes to show that maybe this guy really was more of a huckster than he was actually an inventor. But that being said, some people say that the court case against him was actually part of a larger plot to discredit his work, and that a lot of kind of adversarial parties to him, that was their angle at this. They want to discredit it. You don't want to use fuel water. You don't want to use this technology. Like, we're going to stick with fossil fuels kind of stuff. Some people like on the internet claim, there's no proof of this though. This is something I still find interesting. People like, oh yeah, just like Tesla, just like the other people that we've talked about, the government entities came in after his death and took his documents and suppressed some of the information. That being said, it's reiterated a lot online. I can't see any proof of it in this case. Yeah, I don't think Myers was probably onto a secret technology, but it seems like his invention definitely got him into a little bit of hot water, pun intended. The main thing that makes me think it's also not true, this is the argument with this guy. Some people say the government suppressed the information or the parts of the technology that made it functional, and that it does exist somewhere on somebody's shelf, which is why what people say today is that, hey, like none of his work is reproducible, the technology is a fraud and so forth. And people that want to believe in the conspiracy say, yeah, like it's because the missing components are hidden somewhere in somebody's desk. But we're going to circle around back to the first guy that we talked to in a minute, named Mike Marcum. But I just wanted to possibly say goodbye to somebody that's probably going to go missing in the near future based on some interviews that I saw recently, and that's Terrence Howard. Howard's unconventional views extend beyond some of this patent. So Terrence Howard is an actor, and he's also a scientist. He's got some cool patents under his belt. But lately, I think it was on Joe Rogan's podcast, he claims that he has the ability with some of his new inventions to kill gravity. He's going to turn physics upside down because he's discovered that some of the basic foundations our scientists have discovered are wrong. And he's challenging the science community by basically saying he's got the answers and he's got the tech and he's got more patents coming. And all I can say is that he's made Neil deGrasse Tyson super angry. Terrence Howard is basically claiming that these different vibrations and that our math is wrong. And then if we learn to basically apply his concepts, we can control energy, time, all these things. If Terrence Howard is right, I don't think he is, but if he is, yeah, he's probably going to disappear soon. I really did enjoy some of the movies that you're in. I enjoyed the interviews you did talking about the technology, and I want to thank you. And my only advice, dude, is that if you're really onto something, make backup copies and distribute it throughout the internet so people have access to it. I wish you well. And to Neil deGrasse Tyson, oh yeah, Neil deGrasse Tyson releases this video about this guy like Terrence Howard basically saying, well, yeah, he sent me his thesis and the guy's an idiot. And I told him he was an idiot in 20 different ways before I released this paper. But the thing about Neil deGrasse Tyson, it's so fucking pompous that it's hard to like take him seriously. And sometimes his opinions are like so entrenched in like the black and white ideas that you're taught in basically grade school when it comes to science and physics. And I find he talks a lot about shit he doesn't know. So just for that fact, I want Terrence to be right. I just don't think it's going to happen. Best luck, pal. Anyway, back to our mystery man, our time traveler, Mike Marcum, because the story doesn't end just with his disappearance of him vanishing that night. It gets even more eerie because a twist emerges that one of the listeners of Coast to Coast AM recounted a strange story from 1930. Police found a man who was unidentified, crushed to death in a metal tube on a California beach. The man had a mysterious device with him that resembled a cell phone. This story led people to believe that night that Marcum disappeared, he successfully time traveled back to 1930 and was unfortunately reappeared into an area that, like physically, he was in a different space. It was in a place where it was occupied by a tube, and he's dead. Details of this story begin to spread, and people further investigate Marcum's fate and the fact that he could have got transported back in time. The police investigation into Marcum, they look at this disappearance from every angle. And basically, they're calling it like a voluntary disappearance. They don't see any signs of foul play. And eventually, this guy is classified as a missing person, but it's just left at that. There's been no real updates about Mike Marcum or his whereabouts, other than people claiming that he's that guy that died in 1930 in a metal tube on the beach. What happened to his equipment? Nobody knows. What happened to Mike? Nobody knows. The thing that gave people a lot of fuel for the conspiracies and that this guy might have actually time traveled is that Mike did report in Coast to Coast that he did successfully jump himself, and he ended up 800 miles away and in 2 years, 2 months in a later time, and that his one successful attempt at time travel gave him amnesia. So he did say that it was successful. However, again, it's been 26 years, and this guy seems to have become more of an urban legend than an actual missing person. But I don't know. What do you guys think? So let me know. Do you think this guy actually time traveled? Or do you think this guy took some money and maybe he was like a bit of a fraudster? I don't know. The people around Mike seem to think he was legit. His family and friends didn't really say much about his disappearance. Like, the only concerns they ever really expressed about Mike was that they were worried he's going to electrocute himself. A lot of people were skeptical about his work, and there was no indication that the guy was like mentally ill. There was no indication that there's been foul play. Like, he literally just vanished. I think it's also unlikely that the guy could just disappear for the last 26 years with absolutely no indication of being found. Maybe, again, he did invent something. Maybe he got paid to disappear. Whatever happened to Mike Marcum back in the 1990s, we'll never know. But one thing I can say, he certainly earned the nickname that he got, which is Mike Madman Marcum. Rest in peace if you're dead. If you're not, man, just subscribe to the podcast. Thank you for joining in We're going to be back again. I'm going to let you know that releases for my episodes will be coming out Wednesdays. And yeah, you can enjoy this episode and the next one on next Wednesday. Thanks, guys, and we'll talk soon.